Hey, it's Tim here. In today's video, I'm going to be going through the Tableau Specialist exam. Now, before I get into this video, I'm actually about to sit the exam in just a few minutes, but what I thought I'd do is I'd take some time just to go through the exam setup and what the exam is actually covering. All the Tableau exams have moved over to a new website over on Pearson Vue. That's what I've got here in front of me. So now you can see there's a new page dedicated to Tableau. You can see that all their certifications are now being delivered through Pearson Vue. So this changeover from Loyalist Exam Services has basically been finished and all the exams are here. Now, I've actually already done videos on some of these other certifications. For example, the Certified Associate Consultant and also the Tableau Certified Data Analyst Beta. I've actually done a first impressions on that. So if you want to see that, go check that out. But today I'm going to be doing the Tableau Desktop Specialist. Now, the context of this is I've actually sat all the other exams in the past. I've sat the Certified Associate exam, and I've also done the Desktop Certified Pro exam in the past. Same with Server Associate and same with Server Pro. So I'm not a newbie to Tableau by any means. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm sitting this exam to get a genuine impression of what it's like, what the questions are like compared to some of the more advanced exams, so I can sort of put them on a scale. And I'm generally working my way through all the certifications because I need to actually renew my certifications. They're not valid forever, so you do have to renew them at least once every 2 to 3 years, depending on the exam. Now, if you go to the Tableau website, the first thing they do, if I actually go back to the main website, they have a list of all the certifications that are available. And you can see here the Desktop Specialist is $100. That doesn't include any VAT or any additional taxes or charges. But when you go to pay, it kind of goes through all of that and lays that out so clearly for you. Now, there are no prerequisites for this. So this is a great foundational exam for anyone who's starting out for the first time and just wants to whet their appetite with some sort of certification to say they've started learning Tableau. And if you actually go to the page, it does give a bit of information about the exam details, but the best place to go for any of this is actually to go to the exam prep guide over here. If you click that, it opens up a PDF that looks a little bit like this. Once you've got this PDF open, you go down to several pages and it starts to go through the exam format. So I'm literally about to sign in to the check-in for this exam. That's 30 minutes before the actual exam itself. So be sure to check the details about your specific exam if you're sitting it remotely. If you're in person in the test center, it'll be entirely different. But nonetheless, the exam format here is 60 minutes. It's multiple choice, multiple response, and hands-on. There's a number of questions, is 30. Scoring automatically scored, so you'll find out your results pretty much at the end of the exam. So it's immediately scored because you're answering from a pool of questions. The pass mark is 70%, and it's offered in several languages, which is great. And the delivery platform is a Windows virtual machine containing Tableau Desktop. Now, the skills measured is actually the most useful part here. So it breaks it down into specific skills. So understanding these concepts is just super important. Now, these are fundamental things. If you started learning Tableau and you haven't covered this to me is like the holy grail of what you should really fundamentally understand. And you'd be amazed how many people will go to an advanced certification or an advanced course and not know the ins and out of every one of these individual items. You can think you've covered a topic, but I always say that you don't know a topic until you can explain it really well and clearly to someone else. So that should be your benchmark, essentially, understanding what a join, a blend, a union is. All of these concepts, they're sort of very easy to dismiss, but if you don't understand them too well, you're going to struggle a little bit with this exam. Now, you don't have to know everything. The pass mark is 70%, so you just have to make sure you gauge how much of this you're comfortable with, and can you recall all of this in your head? Tableau exams of the past used to let you search the internet and do a bunch of other things. They don't do that anymore with the new Pearson Vue setup. Essentially, you're in a contained environment, and so don't expect to have things like the help menu and so on and so forth available. You can sometimes look at the documentation, but you'll see lots of exam guides from the past that will say that you can do this. That's no longer the case. Everything has changed. That's why I'm doing this round of videos. So now if I keep going down, you'll see a sample questions list. This is really good because it gives you an idea of what the questions are going to look like. And because this exam has 30 questions and you've got 4 here, that's nearly 10% of the questions you're going to see. So it's a really good idea just to check these out and make sure you can get these right as well. So let's look at some of this. Which one of the following is the best reason to use an extract instead of a live connection? Your data source only supports a live connection. You need to the freshest possible data at all times. You need to apply an aggregation that takes too long when using a live connection. You you need to join tables that are in the data source. C is the obvious answer there. And there's some detractors in there. Some of those might sound correct if you haven't spent enough time with Tableau. But the obvious answer there is an aggregation that takes too long. The whole point of an extract is that it's fast. So be sure that you can get into one of these questions and actually give a logical reason why that is that answer, and you're not just guessing because you think it's the right answer. Be sure you can absolutely explain those. You won't need to in the exam, but it's a really good idea to sort of get in there. We actually get 9 sample questions, and they're really, really good. And then you obviously have the solutions spread out over several pages to give you an idea of what to expect. So that's pretty much it. The exam guide is super, super important. I'll probably go through this in a little bit more detail, maybe some other time when we do a more full-on guide for the entire exam. But nonetheless, that's pretty much it for the exam guide. Once you've, looked at the exam guide, you're ready to book, you head over to Pearson Vue, you sign into your account, you book the exam. And once you've done that, you've signed up, you've paid for it, you have to do a little bit of an exam sort of setup. You get a confirmation email from Pearson Vue. Pearson Vue will tell you your test time. They'll ask you to test your system ahead of time. Then you need to check in 30 minutes before the exam. So I've actually got to hop off in exactly 1 minute to go check in for my exam. Right after, I'll record another video and give you my take on the exam compared to some of the other exams that exist in the Tableau ecosystem. So let me switch over. Okay, so I've literally just started the exam. It took about 45 minutes end to end. I checked in at 10:15. I took about 25 minutes to actually get into the exam because there's a technical issue. Always leave 30 minutes. It doesn't matter how good your setup is. It doesn't matter how, well prepared you are. Something can always go wrong. In this particular case, I actually managed to unplug my webcam as I was showing the proctor around my desk. I actually pulled the cable out. When I did that, the system that was, recording the exam basically wouldn't let me add a webcam back in. So I actually had to restart the whole process again, and that took another 10 minutes. So it's the reason why they say check in 30 minutes, always leave enough time. Now, I've just sat the exam. I know that I've passed. I'll go to my score report in a second. But in essence, I'm just going to show you the process of finding out your score. At the end of the exam itself, if it's an automatically scored exam, you will actually tell you whether you've passed or not, and it will give you the scaled score. And it looks exactly the same as the score report, which is what I'm going to show you now. So let me go ahead and sign into my account. Obviously, I have other exams in here, so you can see that I've got the 3 exams that I've taken and I've made videos on. The Desktop Specialist, which I've just taken, the Certified Data Analyst Beta, Several Certified Associate as well. And if I go into my exam history, you'll see that I've got the 3 exams in here. Now, what I can do is I can go ahead and click on the Tableau Desktop Specialist. You'll see that it has my status here as a passed, has my registration ID and a couple of other bits of information that I'll obviously blur out. But if I go back and I just go back to the previous page, what I can actually do is view the score reports. And that takes me to another page, which actually has the same information again, telling you that I've passed. You can see the 3 exams that I've taken here. And if I select the Desktop Specialist and I hit view, you'll get a PDF that loads up. I've actually already got this open here on another tab, and you can see there's my mug shot that I took right before the exam, along with the pass mark, which is 917 out of 1,000. And that's pretty much it. Now, I sat 45 questions, and I believe the exam guide said, so let's just look at this again. Let's just double make sure what's going on here. So Tableau Specialist exam, there's the PDF. The exam guide said that we had 30 questions. Okay. So what I believe is happening is they ask you 15 questions that aren't necessarily part of the exam, but you don't know which questions those are. So there's typically, if this is like AWS or some of those exams, you do actually get some questions that are not part of the exam. Those are put in there to see how people perform and essentially pull questions for the future, essentially. So they always put in more questions than are actually necessary to pass the exam. Now, if I just go back up, let me just look at this. It doesn't say anything about that in here. So I can only make the assumption that that's the case. I know it's the case with some of the other Tableau exams as well. But nonetheless, yeah, so it says 30 questions here. I actually did 45 in the same 60 minutes, if that makes sense. So I don't know if that's just because this document needs an update, or if it's actually incorrect and the exam has slightly changed. It's maybe something worth just clarifying with certification at Tableau. So maybe I'll try and do that and add it to the comments of this video in the future. But if I actually go back to my score report, you can see everything's in there. Now, the scaled score is out of 1,000. Essentially, the way to think of this is I got 91%, essentially. So 917 over 1,000 is basically 91%. Now, over the number of questions, if I just think I had 45 questions, if they're doing the thing where they're putting in questions that don't count towards exam, it's sort of difficult to figure out exactly how many questions you got wrong. So I think just looking at this, I think I either got like something between 3 and 1 question incorrect for that to be the case. If I think of the exam, actually, if I think of it this way, if I got asked 30 questions and I got 10% of them wrong, that means I got about 3 wrong, okay? And if that's how many actually counted for the exams, it's about 3. If it was 45 and I got 10% of them wrong, then I got 4.5 wrong out of the 45. I'll come to why I got those wrong in a second, because I did have a few issues with this exam, but nonetheless, that's basically how to think of it. The scaled score is basically trying to give you some sort of, you can kind of figure out a percentage. I don't know why they just don't do a percentage, and the same is true with most other software exams. Actually, they always give a scaled score out of 1,000, but nonetheless, that is what it is. Now, when it comes to the questions I got wrong, this is something you have to factor in, and I've always had this issue. In fact, I know I'm not the only one. The Tableau exam is either written, well, let's rephrase. The Tableau exam is written in a style that can sometimes be a challenge to understand. And by that, I mean it's written in a very sort of exam sort of English way. So sometimes they'll ask the question. There was actually a couple of questions today where I was like, hey, what are they actually asking here? Like, I'm not actually clear exactly what they're stating here, okay? And in those cases, there's only 2 questions like that. In those cases, what I tend to do is I mark them for review and I come back. I can't show you what that looks like because you're not allowed to record the exam, but hopefully Tableau will be making resources that you can see and, get a feel for what the interface looks like. You can actually also do like a practice setup. When you do the Pearson Vue practice setup, you actually do go through something that looks like the exam interface. It doesn't have any real questions there. But nonetheless, if I go back to the questions, there's always 1 or 2 questions where I'm never sure what exactly they're actually asking. And it's not because I don't know, it's just because I just don't understand the question properly. So comprehension is a meaningful part of this exam. And where that also gets a little bit more interesting is that with this new exams, you don't have access to the product. So whereas before I could open up Tableau, I could go to the help guide, or I could go download the documentation or go check the documentation and triple check my understanding, with this one, there was a couple of nuanced questions. I'll come to the question types in a second, where I just couldn't remember the exact thing I need to do. I couldn't visualize the exact thing I need to do. And by exact thing I need to do, I'm talking, do I need to right click there, or do I need to click on that, then go down a level in the menu? It's that level of detail that they're actually testing in this exam. So really try and make sure you have some lived experiences of the products, because if you don't, those questions are really going to sting you. In those specific questions where they're asking, where do you do X, or how do you format this to, look like this in the shortest possible way, those ones usually only have 1 correct answer. And it doesn't matter how many years you've done it, there's more than 1 way to do it in Tableau, but they're looking for a specific one. So I'm pretty certain that's what I got wrong. I'll never know, because unfortunately you don't get any sort of breakdown of the questions or answers. Otherwise, people would be making I'm sure, a black market of questions that they saw in the exam. But that's basically what you have to look out for. Now, when it comes to the actual questions itself, I found the questions fairly straightforward. Again, I'm someone who's sat quite a few Tableau exams. In fact, I've sat all of them in the past. I'm resitting them again to renew them. And in terms of the way the questions were termed, bearing in mind you don't have access to the resources, this was definitely a very simple set of questions, but you had to make sure you were paying attention to the detail in the question. There were a lot of questions which had really good detractors. By detractors, I mean they ask you a question, there's 4 answers, and 2 of them sound right, 1 of them is right, and 1 of them is flat out wrong. That's sort of the general approach. And the detractors sometimes can be really, really good. In fact, 1 of them I marked for review. I had to go back, and when I read it again, having looked at some other questions, I realized, mate, that's just completely wrong. I've got the wrong options here. And I recalibrated my marks, and I hopefully I got the question right. I don't actually know. But that's something to be aware of. The question format is pretty simple in that sense. It's always going to be multiple choice question with one answer out of 4. Or they'll ask you a question saying, here's a process, like here's a visualization, for example. How do you build it? Choose the 2 correct options, or choose the 3 correct options. And those ones, you need to make sure you really understand the detail of, again, how that works. I've already talked about this. And that's pretty much it. That's the only sort of thing I got to see in the exam. There was no hands-on part of the exam with the product in front of you. It was all done in this interface with just multiple choice questions and the multi-option questions, as I'm going to call them in this particular case. So that's that. Now, the questions themselves, I've said already, they were very specific. So lots of different questions about the kind of things we were seeing here in the exam guide. So if I take this exam guide and we look at something like adding a union or join or a blend, all of these things were being tested in sort of very deliberate ways. So they wouldn't just ask you what is a join or what is a blend or what is a union, but they'd ask you something about the mechanic of doing those things. So when you look at things like relationships, they might ask you a question on the mechanic of creating a relationship. Or they might ask you a question, for example, on something like maybe physical tables in a relationship. How do those work? And what is the difference? What might you get if you take an extract of those things? Those are all sort of examples of questions. Or if you take one of these charts, for example, take a scatter plot or take something like a dual axis chart, they might ask you about the mechanics of, creating one of those things, or why you might create one of those things, or doing things like visual groupings and applying filters. Again, they might ask you about the specifics of what you do first. And you need to be very sort of aware of the terminology they're using, because they're using what they term to be Tableau terminology. But of course, if you're learning Tableau, you might not be familiar with that. So visual grouping actually means something specific in Tableau. It's a specific way of grouping things compared to grouping using labels and some of this other information. So don't just assume that, I've worked with groups, I know what that is. No, you need to specifically understand what visual grouping means. And so there's lots of different things here. I could go through the whole entire guide. If you'd like me to do that, let's say this: if I get 100 likes on this video, I will make a step-by-step guide for each and every one of these sections in a Notion or something public that people can access, maybe linking off to videos or documentation where it's necessary. And then I'll just walk through some of the specifics over them very quickly. So I'll make that promise: 100 likes. If we get there, I will do that guide as soon as I possibly can. And you can hold me to account on that one. So be sure to sort of really go through this guide and make sure everything is correct. Make sure that you've sort of gone through this. Because this might be your first ever Tableau exam, it's really important that you sort of get this right. If you've sat this exam and maybe you failed it, number one, check out my video on failing certifications. I've actually done one of those. But nonetheless, number two, just spend time on this page and make sure you know these things. It's actually a skills page that you could probably cover in a weekend if you've used the product well enough and long enough to be able to go through these things and understand how they work. And, if you don't understand, just grab one of these headers and go over to Google and just type in Tableau and then paste the thing that you've just grabbed. So in this particular case, I didn't actually copy it. So let's go to there and let's delete that and to say Tableau use shapes. And boom, surprise, surprise. The top hit is an article about using shapes. Okay, it's a slightly dated article using a slightly old version of Windows. You can tell here it's something like Windows 95 or whatever. But nonetheless, it's still going to get you through. And if you look at some of the other things that come up as well, you're going to find the right resource. Now, the thing I always tend to lean to is actually using Tableau's own help pages. So if you search Tableau shapes and you just search KB, that's my typical approach for this, you normally get some sort of kb.tableau.com URL. And then you can go into that knowledge base article. KB stands for knowledge base. So if we click on this particular one, you can see that they have this sort of issue and explanation. But the reason I'm actually going here is because of everything here on the right hand side. So the related links link off to other aspects of the topic, and just spend some time getting familiar with this topic. It might not even come up in the exam, but what you're doing is you're getting the language of Tableau and you're getting the vocabulary into your head, into your sort of everyday working. So when you open the product, you start to think like the the product interface is designed to think. You kind of have to get used to using the terminology and the behaviors that Tableau want to see in this exam. So that's pretty much it. There's not much more to say other than that. This is a very simple, straightforward exam. I think everyone can pass this on their first attempt. There's no reason why you can't. Make sure that the thing you do is you spend time. I think the most likely reason for failing this exam is just not spending enough time on this page. And they do have resources up here at the top. So free training videos, product support, the Tableau product help. The product help, it should be the only thing you need to pass this exam. In fact, all exams could be passed with just the Tableau Help pages. The Tableau Help pages are essentially the manuals for the product. So if you open up Tableau Desktop, for example, you can go in there. Now, it's always worth checking what they're testing the exam on. So for example, if I go to this exam guide, let's go back a few pages, and we'll see here that it doesn't, it should normally stipulate what version of Tableau is being used. Mind you, this might be so foundational that it doesn't actually matter what version. I think I can even say that myself without looking at the guide. A lot of the features tested in the exam will probably work from 2020.2 onwards, because they talk about relationships and the physical and the data layer. So you probably want to make sure you're at least 2020.2 onwards, so you can actually sit this exam and understand all the features and see them in front of you. If you haven't upgraded to any of those versions, maybe spend a bit of time with those versions and then work with it. But ideally, go to the current help pages to get the current version of Tableau, and then choose the product. In this case, it was Tableau Desktop and Web Authoring. Web Authoring is the web version of Desktop, essentially. And then you can go to the PDF or the HTML. I like to go to the HTML because once you're here, they have the full help guide broken down, and you can basically go in and start wherever you want. So if you're talking about building visualizations from scratch, go to build views from scratch. And you've got a few sort of chart types here, but you've also got a few videos and training content that you can find with sample data sets as well. And you've also got sort of other elements that sort of spin off here on the menu. So you can actually go into deeper versions of these and keep going into multiple levels of, explanation. And yes, it is all written, but it does have screenshots. It does have GIFs explaining how to do stuff. So really, if you have no other resource, this is the only resource you need. So like I said before, if you get 100 likes, I will actually make a linked resource. We used to get these actually a while back. You used to be able to get this document here, with each of these sections linking off to the appropriate help pages, and then they kind of stopped. So we'll try and do that. We'll try and recreate the resource so that everyone has something to go to and they can use. But that's it. I think I've talked for long enough about this exam. I'm glad I passed it. Kind of happy about that. But nonetheless, again, it's if you get 100%, I have actually got 100% in an exam before, and that is a rare occasion because, again, I'm always never certain about. Sometimes some of the questions are just difficult to answer. So it is what it is. But nonetheless, yeah, it's a pass. And I wish you guys all luck. Let me know if you've passed the exam in the comments below. Let me know if you found this video useful and maybe that's helped you pass. If not, let me know what could be better. We'll try and make a more dedicated resource for the exam itself going forward. Maybe at some point early in January as well. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next video. Check out my other videos on certifications as well. I've got an actual playlist that I'll put up on screen now so you can go check it out. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.